I was never the girl they whispered about with admiration. I was the girl they didn't notice at all. In a ballroom of jewels and silk, I was wallpaper. Pale blue gowns. Tidy hair. A smile that never lingered too long. It was safer that way. My name is Clara Bell, daughter of a baron whose title was old but purse nearly empty. I was a convenient guest on any invitation list, presentable, polite, and perfectly forgettable. That season, I tried to convince myself I didn't care. But then came him. Julian Hart. Tall. Careless. Every girl's distraction and every mother's headache. He didn't just arrive at a party. He lit it on fire. When he danced with you, people watched. When he looked at you, you felt chosen. So when he asked me for a turn around the floor, I thought it was a mistake. He asked again the next night. And again. Before long, he was calling on me. Talking about my favorite authors. Laughing at things I didn't think anyone else noticed. He made me feel seen. So when I started to feel something dangerous bloom in my chest, I told myself maybe this was one of those strange, golden accidents in life. A rake who sees something real in the girl who always stood behind the potted fern. A story worth believing in. Until I heard him say it. It was raining the night of Lady Trenwith's masquerade. The garden was quiet, the marble steps slick with water. I had stepped outside to find air, to gather my thoughts. My mask was still on. My slipper soaked through. I didn't intend to eavesdrop. But I froze at the sound of his voice. "She'll fall before the last ball," Julian said, laughing. Someone else responded, "You're mad. She barely speaks." "Oh, she's falling already," Julian said. "The shy ones always do. First kiss by Allendale's masquerade. She'll confess by the final waltz. £10 says I win the wager." My ears rang. My heart twisted in a way that felt ugly and familiar. I didn't hear the rest. I turned and walked back into the ballroom. I smiled when I rejoined my father. I danced once more with a visiting count who smelled like too much cologne. Then I left. I left London the next morning without a word. My father was puzzled, but not enough to ask questions. He had debts. I had a godmother in the country who owed my mother a great favor. And I had a promise to myself that no one else heard. I would not return until I could look him in the eye and watch him fall. Not for the girl in the pale blue gown. But for the woman who knew better. 2 years passed. I spent them in the marble halls of my godmother's estate. With her connections, her staff, and her ruthless affection, she did what no debutante instructor ever managed. She taught me how to be sharp. How to walk into a room and silence it. How to speak so people listened. I read newspapers and political memoirs. I watched men negotiate land deals and women win them. I learned how to dress like I was the one doing the choosing. When my godmother passed, I mourned her deeply. But she left me her title. Her money. Her name. And I returned to London with the full weight of it. Lady Clara of Rosefield. The season was already abuzz with newcomers and scandal. But I didn't arrive quietly. I made sure of it. My carriage gleamed. My gowns fit like secrets. I entered the first ball with a count on my arm and an unreadable smile. And there he was. Julian Hart. Older. Just as handsome. Surrounded by friends and admirers, but with a shadow in his eyes. He glanced at me as I passed. And stopped mid-sentence. "Who is that?" I heard someone whisper. Julian stepped forward, as if compelled. I turned toward him, just enough for our eyes to meet. He didn't recognize me. And that was my first win. The second came a week later, when he asked for a dance. I let him wait before saying yes. The music swelled. Our hands met. He tilted his head, trying to place me. I smiled like I'd never met him before. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said slowly. "Lady Clara of Rosefield," I said. "And you?" "Julian Hart," he replied, puzzled. "You look familiar." I tilted my head. "Do I?" He said nothing, but I watched his expression flicker. He thought I looked like someone he might have forgotten. That girl in the corner. The one he wagered on. Let him wonder. Let him chase. I planned to make him fall harder than he ever imagined. And when he did, I'd remind him exactly who I was. The papers called me the Rose of the Season. They didn't know how literal the name was. Rosefield wasn't just a title, it was my armor, my transformation, my ticket back into the game. And the moment Julian Hart looked at me across that ballroom and didn't recognize the girl he once wagered on, I knew the season had begun. He didn't leave me alone after that first dance. He sought me out at every event. Asked after my preferences. Lingered longer than politeness required. It wasn't desperation. Not yet. He wasn't the kind of man who chased. He was the kind who made women wait. But I wasn't waiting. I was baiting. And every little glance, every question, every accidental encounter was another thread in the web I was spinning. One night, at Lord Henley's garden party, I caught him watching me from across the lawn. I pretended not to see. I laughed at the Viscount's story. Touched the sleeve of a foreign diplomat. And when I finally met Julian's gaze, I didn't smile. I tilted my chin just slightly and looked away. He approached minutes later. You seem to enjoy gardens, he said. They're better lit than ballrooms, I said. Are you afraid of the dark? Only of what people say when they think no one's listening. He flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. You're not like the others, he said. I sipped my champagne. I should hope not. He leaned in closer. Have we met before? Wouldn't you remember? His eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought the past would break through the surface. But then a lady tripped on the stone path behind us, and his attention was pulled. I slipped away before he could follow. The thing about revenge is it's not just about striking back. It's about knowing exactly when to strike. If I'd told him who I was that first night, it would have ended quickly. He would have apologized. Lied. Maybe even offered a proposal to save face. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted him to fall. The way I had. Desperately. Blindly. With hope in every breath and fire in every glance. I attended the same parties he did. I ignored him when he tried to corner me. I complimented his closest rival's waistcoat. I let him overhear conversations that weren't meant for him, rumors of courtships, of offers, of noblemen asking for my hand. Each time, his expression cracked a little more. It was during the midsummer ball at Astor Hall that he finally broke pattern. He asked me for a second dance. I let him wait just long enough to feel foolish. Then I nodded. As we stepped onto the floor, the music shifted into a slower waltz. He didn't speak for the first few bars. His eyes scanned my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle he used to know the answer to. I was told you lived abroad, he said eventually. I did, I replied. You've returned, changed. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. I let silence bloom between us before answering. Some people change, I said. Others stay exactly the same. They just run out of places to hide it. His grip on my waist tightened slightly. You speak like someone who knows me. I smiled. Do you feel known? He didn't answer. The dance ended. And when he bowed, it wasn't with that easy grin he usually wore. It was with confusion. Tension. Good. He began sending flowers the next week. Orchids. Peonies. Roses. The notes were vague, trying to flirt but unsure how. I didn't respond. When I passed him at Lord Everleigh's card room, he looked surprised. As if he'd forgotten women could ignore him. I let rumor slip. Nothing too obvious. Just enough to spark jealousy. Lady Branson claimed she saw me walking with a French countess's son. Lady Dilly swore I was set to be engaged to a Scottish earl. None of it was true. But Julian didn't know that. And each time he heard a whisper, he looked more frayed. Finally, at the theater, he snapped. He found me in the corridor outside the box seats. The hallway was empty. The orchestra had just started. He blocked my path. Tell me, he said, voice low. Who are you? I raised a brow. A lady enjoying the opera. That's not what I mean. Then ask a better question. He stared at me like a man who had a dream once and forgot it the moment he woke up, but knew it mattered. I've been trying to recall your face, he said. 4 weeks. It haunts me. Maybe you've seen it before, I said. Somewhere you didn't think to look closely. Why won't you tell me? Because you haven't earned the right to know. He stepped back like I'd struck him. And I left him there, in the corridor, with the music rising behind us. Let him wonder. Let him chase. Let him feel the weight of falling into something he couldn't name. He once wagered I'd fall first. I intended to collect interest. Julian began attending every event I did. Not just the grand balls or the curated soirees, but the smaller affairs, the charity auctions, the garden luncheons, the afternoon teas where half the guests didn't know which fork to use. He was always close, always circling, like a hawk too proud to admit it was hunting. At first, I found it amusing. Then, I found it useful. Every lingering glance, every frustrated silence, every awkward attempt at charm chipped away at the polished, arrogant mask he wore so well. He was unraveling. And I was only getting started. At Lady Marchant's musical evening, I saw the moment he broke. A young lord had just finished a violin solo, and the guests were mingling near the refreshment tables. I was speaking with Lord Wilton, a dashing widower with a smile like sin and eyes far too perceptive. He leaned in and whispered something that made me laugh, and just then, Julian walked by. His expression twisted, not into jealousy, but something deeper. Something bitter. He turned on his heel and left the room. Later that night, I found him alone on the terrace, the cold air brushing against his sleeves. He didn't notice me at first. His head was bowed, hands clenched around the railing. For a moment, I saw the boy behind the bravado. Not the man who made wagers in gardens, but someone, smaller. "You left early," I said, my voice light. He didn't look at me. "Too warm inside." "Yet you're flushed." He turned then. His eyes searched mine. "What are you doing to me?" I tilted my head. "I could ask you the same. I can't stop thinking about you." I let the silence stretch. "I've never," he started, then hesitated. "I thought I was clever. I thought I knew women. But you're different. That frightens you." He laughed once, short and humorless. "It does." I stepped closer, just enough to make him hold his breath. "You don't recognize me," I said softly. He blinked. "Should I?" My lips curled into a smile, not quite kind. "Perhaps not yet." I turned and left him there. Because that was the plan. He needed to fall deeper before I gave him a name to regret. But that night, for the first time, I questioned the tremor in my chest. Because for all his flaws, Julian was breaking in a way that felt genuine. And I remembered what it had felt like, those few weeks before the masquerade. When he looked at me like I mattered. When he listened. When he danced with me like he saw something others didn't. Was any of it real? I shoved the thought aside. The next day, he sent a letter. Not flowers. Not gifts. A letter, written in his own hand. "Lady Clara, I fear I've made many mistakes in my life. Most, I've carried easily. But the thought of hurting you, though I cannot say how or when, has become unbearable. If there is something I have done, knowingly or not, I beg you to tell me. Yours, Julian Hart." I folded it carefully and tucked it away. At the next ball, I didn't speak to him. I danced with 3 men he hated. I laughed louder than I had to. And when he tried to catch me as I moved between rooms, I let another gentleman escort me away. He was breaking. Which meant it was time. Time to lead him back to the beginning. The garden where he made that cruel wager still existed. It belonged to Lady Trenwith, whose annual masquerade was days away. I ensured I would be attending. I ensured he would too. And I made sure the setting was perfect. I wore a gown like the one from that night. Pale blue, simple, with a mask of silver lace. I stood beneath the same ivy-draped archway where I had once stood, invisible and hurt. And this time I waited for him. He found me before midnight. He paused, confused by the mask and the dress, but his voice was steady. "You," he said. "I've been looking for you." "Have you?" "I knew you'd be here. Because it's where things began." He narrowed his eyes. "You remember that night too?" I said nothing. "Clara," he said, stepping closer. "What happened here?" "You made a wager." His breath caught. "You remember," I whispered. You said I'd fall first. That I was a game. A joke." His eyes filled with panic. "I didn't know, Clara, I didn't know it was you." "I swear, but it was," I said, voice sharp now. "It was me. The girl you charmed. The girl who believed you." He reached for my hand. I let him take it. "I didn't mean it," he said. "It was stupid. I was stupid." "Why did you do it?" "I thought I had to prove something. To my friends. To myself. I didn't realize what I was losing. And what am I now?" He looked at me like I was the moon and the sun and the sky between. "Everything." I stepped closer. "Then fall, Julian." And I left him again. Because it wasn't time for forgiveness. Not yet. After the masquerade, Julian stopped pretending. He didn't hide his stares. He didn't flirt with other girls. He didn't retreat behind smug remarks or clever lines. He pursued me, openly and without shame. He sent notes. Honest ones, awkward ones. He waited outside drawing rooms, found excuses to be near me, offered his arm whenever I passed, even if I didn't take it. And I didn't. Because this was the part of the story where he had to feel it all, the uncertainty, the ache, the weight of wanting something just out of reach. The way I once did. The way I stood behind that garden wall, heartbreaking in silence. He started asking others about me. Quietly, at first. Then with urgency. Lady Branson told me he'd gone to her in confidence, asking about my time abroad. Lord Everley said Julian was asking about my godmother's estate, trying to understand where I'd gone and why I'd changed. The truth was chasing him faster than I had planned. But I wasn't done. One evening, at a formal dinner hosted by the Whitmores, he was seated directly across from me. Our eyes met with every course. Every time I lifted my glass. Every smile I offered someone else. He watched like he couldn't stop himself. After dessert, I rose to speak with the hostess. On my way back, he stood in my path. "Walk with me," he said. Not a request. But not a command either. A hope. I hesitated. Then I nodded. We stepped out into the cold night, the garden lanterns casting a golden glow across the hedges. He didn't speak right away. He just walked beside me, silent, steady. Then, finally, "Why didn't you tell me that night in the corridor?" I looked at him. "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer. "I wanted to," he said instead. "But I didn't let myself." "Why?" "Because I knew the moment I admitted it was you, I'd owe you something I wasn't ready to give." "And what's that?" "Everything." The wind shifted. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He wasn't the golden boy of the season anymore. He was something real. Something raw. "I was cruel," he said. "I don't even remember saying the words that night. God, I thought I was being clever. I didn't think you heard. I didn't think anyone did. I did. I know. And I would do anything to take it back. You can't. I wish I could." I turned toward him fully. "You made a game of me, Julian. I make games of everyone. I always have. But you were the one person I never should have. Because I was easy? Because you were different." I held his gaze. "What do you want from me now?" He stepped closer. "A chance. A real one. Not because of guilt. Not because of the past. But because I can't stop thinking about you." "That's not love." "It's not," he agreed. "But it's the start of something better." He offered me his hand. I didn't take it. But I didn't walk away. The next morning, I received a letter. Longer than the last. It didn't beg. It confessed. Not just about me, but about who he had been. The empty years. The nights that blurred together. The women he courted but never truly saw. And the girl he did see, but too late. He wrote that he understood if I never forgave him. That he would leave the city for the rest of the season if I wished. That he only needed to say it, once, while I still listened. I didn't respond. But I didn't need to. By now, every room we entered together pulsed with tension. People whispered. Some wondered if I was cruel. Others said he deserved it. The truth was somewhere in between. I wanted him to fall. But not into regret. I wanted him to fall into clarity. To look at me and see more than the wallflower he once dismissed. To want me not because of guilt, but because he finally understood the weight of what he lost. At the Riverton ball, he found me alone on the balcony. "Clara. Julian. I'm in love with you." I said nothing. He continued. "Not the way I used to pretend to love. Not the polished kind that makes for ballads and proposals. The real kind. The kind that hurts." I turned to him. "And what do you expect me to do with that?" "Nothing. I just needed you to know." He stepped back, bowed slightly, and walked away. It was the first time he didn't ask for something. And that was when I knew. He'd fallen. Not into a game. Not into a story. Into me. After Julian left the balcony, I stood there a long time. The music floated from inside, muffled and sweet, but I couldn't hear it clearly. Not over the echo of his voice. "I'm in love with you. Not the way I used to pretend to love. The real kind. The kind that hurts." He didn't ask for anything. Didn't demand forgiveness. Didn't try to explain it all away. He just said the words and left them with me. And for the first time since the night I heard him make that cruel wager, I didn't know what to do next. Because I had won. He had fallen. Fully. Deeply. Openly. The wager he made years ago had come true, but not the way he expected. And not the way I had planned. I returned inside and moved through the ballroom with grace, nodding at acquaintances, smiling at compliments. But my thoughts stayed with him. With that moment. With the part of me I'd buried when I left the city, the part that once believed in golden boys and slow smiles and ballroom promises. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't planned for him to change. I especially hadn't planned for him to mean it. The next few days passed in a daze. I went to every event I was expected at. I wore the right gowns. Gave the right answers. But I didn't see Julian. Not once. Not even a glimpse. He had meant what he said, he wasn't chasing me anymore. He had let go. And that unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. On the fourth day, I walked into the morning room and found a package waiting. Wrapped in navy paper with a simple white ribbon. There was no note. Inside was a small book. The first novel we had ever spoken about. A battered copy of the same edition. The pages were soft and annotated. I opened it to the middle and found a folded letter tucked inside. It wasn't addressed to Lady Clara of Rosefield. It was addressed to Clara Bell. Clara, you once told me this story made you feel like you were more than just someone standing in the corner. That you felt seen in its pages. I didn't understand that then. I do now. I see you. I see everything I was too blind to notice. If I could go back to that first dance, I would do it all differently. But I can't. All I can do now is try to become the kind of man who would be worthy of that second chance. Whether or not I ever receive it. Yours always, Julian. I closed the letter and sat there, hands trembling slightly. It would be so easy to say it ended here. That I forgave him, that we danced, that all was mended. But it wasn't that simple. Because I had built something since I left. A life. A title. A power I never dreamed of having. I wasn't that girl anymore. And I didn't want to become her again just to fit into someone else's story. If I let him back in, it would have to be on my terms. That evening, I sent a note. Julian, tomorrow evening. The gardens behind Astor Hall. Dusk. Come if you mean it. I didn't sign it. He would know. The next night, I arrived early. The sky was dipped in gold, the hedges casting long shadows across the stone path. It was the same garden where I'd once heard him betray me. The same garden where I had stood in silence and pain. But now, I stood tall. I waited not as someone hoping to be chosen, but as someone doing the choosing. He arrived just as the sky turned orange. He looked unsure, almost hesitant. Like he expected this to be the final undoing. Clara, he said softly. I nodded once. Julian. We stood there for a moment, the air thick with things unsaid. Then I spoke. You humiliated me. I know. You made a bet on my heart. I know. You didn't care who you hurt. I didn't. And I regret it more than I can say. I stepped forward. But you changed. He looked up, startled. You listened when I gave you nothing. You waited when I offered silence. You didn't demand an ending. I didn't deserve one. No, I agreed. You didn't. He braced himself. But you earned one. His eyes searched mine. I'm not the girl you once saw in the shadows, I said. And I'm not here to be rescued or worshipped. I'm here because I choose to be. He nodded slowly. And what do you choose now? I stepped even closer. I choose to see if the man you are now is someone I can trust. His breath caught. I can't promise love, I said. Not yet. I'm not asking for that. What are you asking for? He looked at me like he had years ago, only this time it was real. Time, he said. A chance to prove myself. A chance to walk beside you, not in front of you. Not above you. I extended my hand. He took it. Carefully. Gratefully. And we stood there, the sun dipping behind the hedges, two people who had broken each other once now standing in the light. Changed, scarred, and ready. He had fallen first. But maybe, just maybe, this time we'd fall together. Julian didn't kiss me that night. He didn't try. He just held my hand until the sky turned violet and the garden lights flickered on, one by one. Then he walked me back to the front gates and said good night like it meant something. And it did. Because that version of him, the patient one, the steady one, was someone I hadn't known before. And I liked the quiet strength of him far more than the polished charm I used to dream about. Still, I kept my guard up. Trust isn't rebuilt in a single evening. It's earned in 1,000 small ways. And Julian seemed to understand that. He didn't overwhelm me with gestures. He didn't crowd me at every event. Instead, he started showing up in quieter places. In bookshops. At charitable auctions. At lectures on politics and art. Not following me. Just present. Listening. Learning. And for the first time, I noticed things I hadn't before. How he asked questions and actually waited for the answers. How he introduced me to people by using my full title and letting me speak first. How he handled insults with grace, even when older gentlemen whispered things like changed her story, that one or back from the dead and dangerous. He never defended me with a raised voice. He just looked at them and said, "She's more than you'll ever deserve to understand." And left it at that. One afternoon, I found myself seated beside him at a small poetry reading hosted by Lady Dilly. He didn't speak much. Just offered me a cup of tea with the precise amount of sugar I liked, something I had only ever mentioned once, years ago, in passing. After the reading, he didn't linger. He just slipped a note into my hand before he left. It read, "I don't want to be your past mistake. I want to be your future's quiet constant." I folded it and kept it in my pocket all evening. My heart hadn't fully healed. But it stirred. At the end of that week, Lady Branson hosted her famous lake picnic, a sprawling event on the edge of her family's country estate. There were boats and blankets, lemon cakes and champagne, whispered gossip and loud declarations. I wore soft green silk and let the sun warm my shoulders. Julian arrived late. On purpose, I think. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he took a book from his coat and sat under a tree across the lawn. Alone. Calm. A statement without saying a word. And for the first time in a long time, I was the one who approached him. "What are you reading?" I asked. He held up the cover. It was a book I'd once recommended to him, the kind of story that took time to appreciate. He hadn't even looked at it back then. "You remembered," I said. "I've been trying to remember all the right things," he replied. I sat beside him. Not too close. Not too far. We talked for hours. Not about what had happened. Not about the garden. Not about the wager. Just about now. About music. About ambition. About how strange and sharp it felt to grow into the person you always wanted to be. When the sun dipped low and guests began drifting back toward the carriages, he stood, then offered me his hand. "Come boating with me," he said. I took it. We moved slowly across the water, the air still and the world golden. It wasn't romantic in the way novels describe. It wasn't dramatic or breathless. It was simple. Safe. And when he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my cheek, I didn't flinch. "You're different now," I said. "I'm still learning," he answered. "You hurt me." He nodded. "And I won't stop trying to make it right." I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time since that awful night in the garden, I felt something soften. Not just in my chest, but in the space between us. Like something long buried had finally begun to bloom. "I believe you," I said. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I didn't promise him anything more than that. But the look in his eyes told me it was enough. For now. The gossip columns shifted. Where once they whispered about the mysterious Lady Clara of Rosefield and the sudden return of a long-forgotten wallflower, they now speculated about the gentleman she allowed to escort her. The man she smiled at when she thought no one was watching. The only one she danced with twice at Lord Witherby's ball. They wrote his name often. Julian Hart. They called it a reformation. A redemption. A scandal waiting to happen. But I didn't care. Because I had made my choice. Slowly. Carefully. On my terms. Julian had become a man I could trust, not because he asked for forgiveness, but because he didn't expect it. He earned back my attention the same way he lost it, word by word, moment by moment. But this time, there were no wagers. No masks. Just the truth between us. The rest of the season moved like water. One event melted into the next. Our names became linked in conversation, in dances, in the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. But I still held back. There was one thing he hadn't done yet. He hadn't said he was sorry in front of anyone else. Not the apology whispered in a garden. Not the words buried in private letters. I didn't want a public spectacle. I didn't need roses or grand gestures. But if he truly understood what he had done, if he truly wanted to rewrite the story, he needed to own it. And then came the final ball of the season. Hosted by the Duchess of Ainsworth, it was the crowning jewel of the social calendar. Every eligible name would be there. Every alliance would be cemented. Every mistake remembered. I wore deep red. It was not a color wallflowers chose. It was power stitched into fabric, set with garnets, edged with defiance. When I stepped into the ballroom, the crowd parted for me. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Julian was already there. He watched me the way someone watches a storm, ready to be ruined, if it meant being touched by it first. We danced once. Then again. And on the third, as the orchestra slowed and the guests encircled the floor, he did something that silenced the entire room. He stepped back. And he spoke. May I have everyone's attention? The music faded. People turned. My heart slammed against my ribs. Julian stood beside me, voice steady, eyes fixed on the crowd. 2 years ago, he said, I made a cruel mistake. I treated a young woman's heart like a game. I wagered on her affection. I laughed about it in the garden of a friend's home, never thinking she might hear. Never thinking it mattered. A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Trenwith paled. But it did, he continued. Because she heard. And she left. And I didn't even know what I had lost until she returned, not as a shadow, but as a force. He turned to me. I was a fool. And I am sorry. Not because I was caught. Not because I was punished. But because I hurt someone who deserved reverence, not ridicule. No one spoke. He bowed to me then, deeper than custom required. As if I were royalty. As if the apology itself had weight. When he straightened, he didn't smile. He didn't wait for applause. He simply walked away from the dance floor, leaving me alone at the center. I looked around the room. Every face frozen. Every fan stilled midwave. And then I followed him. Not because I forgave him instantly. But because he gave me the one thing I hadn't asked for. A public reckoning. I found him in the side hallway, head bowed. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. He looked up. Yes. I did. I stepped closer. And now? I wait. For what? For you. I studied him. The raw honesty in his expression, the steadiness in his posture, the vulnerability that would have embarrassed the man I once knew. I touched his sleeve. Walk me home. He exhaled slowly. And offered me his arm. That night, beneath the quiet stars and gaslight glow, we walked through the city in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of the words we no longer had to say. Full of something real. Something earned. He had fallen. Not with fanfare or poetry. But completely. Quietly. And this time I was ready to fall too. The morning after the Ainsworth ball, the city erupted. The scandal sheets printed Julian's speech nearly word for word, embellished with flourishes and exaggerated gasps, but the heart of it remained. A titled gentleman confessing to cruelty. A lady rising from disgrace to power. They called it many things, a tragedy, a triumph, a love story rewritten. I didn't read the papers. I already knew how the story ended. Or rather, how it began again. Julian didn't call on me the next day. Or the one after. He didn't send flowers or notes. He had done what I never imagined he could, he stepped back without expectation. Without pursuit. He had put everything into my hands, and now he waited. And I made him wait. Not to punish him. But to understand myself. Because I wasn't just deciding whether I could love him. I was deciding whether I could be loved by him without losing the woman I had become. The woman who spoke with power, who entered rooms like she belonged in them, who didn't flinch when men looked her in the eye. And when I finally found my answer, it came not with thunder but with clarity. I hosted a small dinner. 6 guests. Carefully chosen. He was the 7th. He entered the room like he didn't know if he was welcome. I greeted him at the door. Julian. Clara. I'm glad you came. His shoulders dropped just slightly. I didn't expect to be invited. I know. That's why I invited you. The meal was quiet, elegant, filled with laughter that slowly softened the edges of our old wounds. I seated him across from me, not beside me. I wanted him to see me clearly. And he did. He didn't try to dominate the conversation. He asked questions. Listened. Watched. And when the final course had been cleared, and the others moved to the drawing room, I stayed behind and poured 2 glasses of wine. I handed him one. This isn't forgiveness, I said. This is something new. I'll take it. You're not who you were. I don't want to be. I won't ever be that girl again. He stepped closer. I wouldn't ask you to. I studied him. The man who once wagered on my heart like it was a game. The man who now looked at me like I held the sun. I built a life after you, I said. And I don't intend to let it go. You shouldn't. I want to be part of that life. Not the center of it. Just part of it. Beside you. I reached for his hand. He took it. This time I didn't pull away. Weeks passed. We didn't rush. He wrote again. I replied. We walked in the park. We sat beside each other at concerts. People stared. Whispers rose. But I stopped caring what they said. I wasn't falling under his spell. I was choosing him, piece by piece. One evening, in the library of my estate, I looked up from a book to find him watching me. What? I asked. He smiled slowly. I think I'm in love with you again. I closed the book. That makes two of us. We didn't get engaged right away. There was no breathless proposal, no dramatic declaration under fireworks. Just us. Just time. And when the day did come, when he knelt in the rose garden behind my townhouse, holding a simple ring and asking if I'd walk beside him into whatever came next, I said yes. Not because I forgot the past. But because I finally believed in the future. They say revenge is best served cold. But sometimes, it's not about serving anything at all. Sometimes, it's about making someone fall so deeply they have to climb their way back to you, one truth at a time. And when they do? You don't just forgive them. You make them worthy.